Okay, meeting to come to order here. We don't have a quorum, but I think we're necessarily voting on anything. We have the legislator meeting today, and Pam is meeting with the legislature in about 30 minutes, and the only time I could get in with Sue Miller for about the Early Learning Council was 11:25 with Representative Springer. So we're going to try to aim for 11:15 if we can to get out of here, and otherwise, Ron, you're running the show. you're running the show.
It's all yours, Ron.
It's all yours.
Do good things.
We're adjourning when you leave.
Okay, great. I want to say that Peter will take on his own initiative on number 5 there on the visits in March. If we do put that together, things are obviously change of management are up in the air a little bit, so we'll just say that. But let's, Peter, why don't you introduce your crew here, and how are we going to move forward here on your research team's efforts?
Thank you very much,
Here's Hannah right here.
There's Hannah. So, members of the subcommittee, we have at OEIB a research team, and they are almost all represented here today. They're over at that table, and we have a shorter amount of time than we'd expected, so we may want to go a little bit quicker than we were thinking, just letting the team know that. But the purpose is to give you some insight into what OEIB is doing with respect to measuring outcomes from the investments that we've made. And we could literally on a lot of these go into a whole hour and a half on just one of them. So by the nature of our time together, it's just going to be a survey. But we are available to you as a committee and as citizens who want to ask follow-up questions and find out more of what we're doing after this meeting. And please feel free to continue the dialogue past today. And if we don't get through everything today, we'll bring some of this back at our next meeting. So I'd like to introduce first Dr. Cheng-Fei Lai, comes to us from the University of Oregon most recently, and she's going to be talking to you about a sort of a snapshot of different research stuff that we're doing.
Could I interject here?
Absolutely.
Doctor, you're from University of Oregon, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
My grandson plays at Eastern Washington, and you just took our quarterback.
I just did.
Yes, you did. And it's not very nice of you to do that. Since they're rated...
Apologize.
That's okay.
She's no longer affiliated with the University of Oregon.
Don't even worry about it.
I guess if you apologize to him, you'll make me mad.
Yeah, just stay neutral on all things sports and you're safe.
Okay, great. He's really good.
Well, thanks for having me here. So, like Peter said today, I'm going to just give everyone a really quick snapshot of what we do here in our research team. And
Where's Seth at? He's going to have to operate this thing here. We're operating this.
How about I just do it?
So this is a list of some of the current and ongoing projects that we work on, both Chrissy and I. And Storytime is it's a public media campaign, and quality education model is this is a replication study, and I'll go into more details in the future in a few more slides. Chronic absenteeism, which I know State is very interested in looking at attendance problems. Culturally responsive pedagogy practices, science, technology, engineering, mathematics hubs, STEM hubs, regionally achievement collaborative initiative, RAG. Chrissy will actually elaborate on that in the next segment. And I'll touch briefly on the methods that we use for all these projects, which consist of quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. So like I said, Storytime, it's a public media campaign, and basically we want to evaluate the reach of the campaign messages to our target audiences, parents, businesses, and local community organizations. And if you're not aware of Storytime, it's a new early learning initiative, and there were 5 focus communities: Malheur, Grand Ronde, South Coast, Klamath, and Multnomah counties, where the launch were made in last year, towards the end of last year. So we conducted 2 surveys, a paper pencil one to measure the perceptions of parents on issues or barriers that were unique to their communities, and to measure the kinds of literacy activities they currently are engaging with their young children. And we also did a phone survey with local businesses. And here we want to reach, we're trying to measure the reach of the story time message to local businesses. And we had the help of a group of graduate level students from U of O who are our interns from last term. And what they did was contacting local businesses using scripted interview questions. And for these two surveys, we examined the responses descriptively. And we have also a very short interview phone survey with key partners who help with demolishes. And we use a qualitative approach to identify common themes from those responses.
Yes,
Yes, feel free, yes.
So are you going to share the survey questions, the results with us? Bruce Hanson, how are you? I taught with Bruce. I have to say, he's an amazing teacher. It's great to see him.
He didn't go to Oregon too, did he?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, where did he go to school? Where did he go to school?
Chico State
Ah, okay.
and Linfield.
Oh,
Oh, there we go. Now
you're
we're
talking.
seriously. Now we're really talking now.
so are you going to be sharing those questions?
Not today because this presentation is mostly talking about the projects and the methods that we use to examine our projects.
However, as a follow-up, if you're interested, we just were pressed on time, and if we felt we dug too far, we're happy to have a dialogue
Okay,
with any board
great.
member, any
Thank you.
community member interested. All of these are really interesting studies. So, but
And we are wrapping up with the Storytime project right now, so we hope to have the report out soon. So the next project is the quality education model, which is basically a replication study, and it's often encouraged in research, but very often not conducted. But we see a lot of value in replication studies. That's why we're doing this. It's essentially a cohort study and looking at third graders in 2003 and 4 who have graduated in 2012 and 13. The author used linear probability modeling technique to identify factors with the largest effects or impacts on high school graduation. And those are all the factors. Their reading, OAT score, gender, ethnicity, whether they're specialized students, economic status, whether they're tech students, pregnant or parenting status, their 10th grade attendance, whether they're LP students, and the LP duration before they enter high school. So what I'm doing is replicating study using a very similar technique called logistic regression model, and I'm going to compare the results to see if there's any similarity or differences, and create a model using math OAT scores instead of reading. And if time permits, I would also like to look at model comparisons to kind of fine-tune the model, look at factors that have the highest impact, explore different models and examine different outcomes, like whether the students are 9th grade on track or 10th grade attendance rate.
And if I could offer just one comment, and then we'll take the question. This research is done by ODE originally. Hannah's part of the commission that oversees that work, and I used to be on that commission as well. Duncan was as well. It's a high-stakes commission now because some of the research from the Quality Education Commission went into budget recommendations that are in the governor's recommended budget. And because it's so high stakes, it made a lot of sense from what Cheng Fei is saying. Let's replicate it and expand it a little bit. Look at math, because we're very interested in math in third grade too. And I hope this can be more of an ethic among state researchers, is that we do some replication. It builds collaboration and it builds better answers. So
You may have answered my question. My question was what the original cohort and the replication cohort, is it the same cohort and the differences you're looking at math instead of reading, or what's the...
It's basically finding the same cohort and using the reading OAT scores, and after we do that, then we'll replicate it with the math.
So I see the areas that you're looking at. In the quality education model, in the report, it comes out with the learning conditions that we're building for students to be successful. So will you look at things like the size of the school, the class size that the students are in? Are any of those components going to be looked at through this study to see if that impacts
so
their success level?
That's, if time permits, when I explore the different models, when fine-tuning, look at other factors that could affect high school graduation. But the first step is to replicate and see how our results are similar or different.
And I would just say with the TEL survey results that we have back and having the class size be that huge indicator from teachers and administrators, that if we can really look at that and let's dig in as Oregon to figure out, does that impact student learning? Yes, no, and if it does, what are we going to do about it?
One thing I neglected to point out, because we're rushed on time a little bit, is our research team has a very wide variety of talents. We've chosen on purpose. And one thing in Cheng Fei's interview that she mentioned that we hope to access is this whole idea of looking at conditions, looking at a school, and having that be one factor while you also look at the individual characteristics of students. So it's a rich area that you've got expertise in, and I hope to be able to capitalize on it. TEL survey would be one, class size, community factors, where the school sits, and other things. But again, I just want to point out that this is a high-stakes study that's never been replicated. We're making decisions based on it. And the first thing is, do we come to the same answers that ODE did, doing everything the same way? And so far the answers are no. It's not quite the same. Little differences, but that's what happens in research when someone replicates.
So what's the difference between using the word replicate and duplicate? Because, where I'm coming from is that I'm involved with the Relief Nursery system, and the Relief Nurseries was birthed out of the Eugene area, and they're replicated throughout the state. In other words, taking this idea, this concept, and then fitting it to your own mold in the different area. And it's not an absolute cookie cutter at all. It's a different model in every city, and there's 14 or 15 of them. So what's your when you say replication? What does that mean? To me, it would mean duplication. That means so what is the difference?
I think they're probably just different terminology, just very similar, I guess. But basically, I'm using the very same factors that Brian looked at, and using the same cohort, I'm trying to look for the same cohort to replicate the study.
So my answer to that is that the replicated study does not necessarily produce the exact same results. So you think a duplication, it's going to be the same.
Exactly.
But researchers make decisions along the way. And I've watched Cheng Fei have to wrestle with bad data. How am I going to include or exclude this data? What's my decision rule? If it's slightly different by another researcher, everything looks the same until the punchline, and it's different.
Okay, got it.
Thanks for clarifying.
Are you back?
So the next project is on chronic absenteeism, and as everyone probably already know, OEIB is very invested in studying this topic. And in the initial phase of this project, what I helped was look at school descriptively to find the ones with high and low attendance rate, and also at the same time look at a host of different characteristics of the school, the percentage of students who are in special ed, ELL, different ethnicity, composition, their economic status, and a host of all these different variables, and just look at school attendance in the whole state from bird's eye level. And recently an RFP has been awarded to PSU and Coalition of Communities of Color as the contractors. And so they're examining chronic absenteeism using qualitative approach. And I'm on the other hand going to look at chronic absenteeism from using some different quantitative approach. And what I'm going to do is to study a cohort, just like the QEC model, on their attendance pattern using a method called latent class growth analysis, where it's a group-based trajectory modeling technique that categorizes students into different attendance patterns. And this work is actually inspired by Schoenberger's, I'm sure I did not pronounce his last name correctly, Dr. Schoenberger's study on longitudinal attendance patterns, where he found 4 groups of students. Constant attendee, who are the majority students, close to about 80%. Then there are 3 different types of truants group, developing early and chronic traits. And these are smaller groups of students. But I think it will be very interesting for us to study this in our state to see whether we can find similar group of students with similar trajectories, and the implication could be very significant. You know, we can come up with plans for intervention, for screening of these type of students with different trajectories on the talents.
I think it's important to also put a dollar sign on that. I mean, why is it there? It means there's the economic reason, not only for the individual person, of course, for attendance, but also there's for the lack of attending. That's a cost to the society, and we need to know what that dollar sign. Then, if the educators tell us what some reasons are, then we need to address that because there'll be a return on investment on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really critical.
So a lot of the recent literature talks about our ability to find these patterns before a child is in first grade, kindergarten and preschool, and I'm interested in knowing what the starting point of your cohort is. Because now that we have QRIS and some attendance data in Head Start and other preschool programs, will we be looking at preschool patterns and how this, you know, sort of extends out younger or not? Or are we going to start at first?
Yeah, my goal is to, again, kind of do a replication study starting with first grade, because I think that's what the current data system has the most complete information on. And if we were to expand it to K or pre-K, it really depends on the data quality that you know, the data that's available and the quality of that data.
Are we still early enough to
Well, Mike
consider-
actually on our team is our database integration specialist working on exactly this topic. Do you want to just weigh in on where we are in early learning data?
Yes, so I don't know if OEIB, but I believe OEIB intends to collect those data. I think we're about 3 years out still. OEIB needs to pull in the data, and then it needs to flow to the statewide longitudinal data system. So attendance is taken in kindergarten now. It's not super high quality data. So it's on the roadmap, but probably down. And
Okay.
yes, very interesting.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute. So I know OD already has 2 early learning programs in their database and has for a long time.
True.
Head Start, early,
Oregon pre-K.
OPK, early Head Start, and EIECSE. Is there any reason why we couldn't at least look at those before the QRIS link happens in the way that you're talking about?
No, I think that's a great idea, and I think that's what we're doing.
Because particularly given the age 3 to grade 3 and the focus on absenteeism in that, it
Yep.
doesn't make any sense to start here if we have the opportunity to shape the study.
Yeah. The pre-K data is handled differently than other data currently. It's essentially collected very late in the year, so it's not
Okay.
Daily.
actionable at this point.
Okay. But if there's a way to know if there is a pattern early and we can get to it before, that would be to your point about interventions or
That
handling
can be
interventions.
Thank you for
another
that.
study.
Hannah?
I was just going to say, the other thing that we have in Oregon that's problematic for our younger students is the age at which you are to attend school.
Right.
Right.
And we've talked about, I was on the kindergarten task force that was working on trying to look at that issue of 6 instead of 7. Where can we do that? And so the data that we're getting are our students who need to be in school. It's a question we haven't answered.
Yep. That's important.
Next slide, Cheng-Fei.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the last project I will share with everyone. It's on culturally responsive pedagogy, and what we're hoping to do is to use a case study approach on some selected schools and examine teachers' communication patterns and their knowledge on culturally responsive pedagogy. And what we propose to use is a social network analysis, which is a systematic approach used to quantify and visualize connections or ties between units. Teachers with teachers, teachers with administrators, anyone in the school system, and to visualize that overall network structure. And what we're hoping to do is to understand the underlying structure of this communication and knowledge network. And we hope to find answers to things like what is their communication patterns like? Who do you talk to about your culturally responsive teaching practices and how frequent? We want to find out about information sharing patterns, transfer and development of new knowledge between individuals, levels, and units within an organization. So FYI, social network analysis is a new method to our team, and so we will be working with a consultant on this, Dr. Alan Daly from UCSD, who is a researcher known to conduct studies using social network analysis. And this is an example of a communication network based on a study that Dr. Daly himself and his colleagues did back in 2009, where he examined the communication and network structures of principals and central district staff, office staff in a mid-sized school district in California. And I think I'm kind of running out of time, so just very quickly, you'll see like circles and squares on this visuogram, and what they represent is the lighter color the district offices, and the darker color squares and circles represent principals. And so this visuogram is kind of stating that the communication network is pretty sparse, so there's not a whole lot of communication between the district and principals. And the context here is that they're implementing a strategic plan on responding to the in need of improvement status under the no child left behind. And so they're doing a district-wide initiative on this. And so with the sparse communication, you can imagine that these are barriers to implementing those strategic plans. So we're hoping to we're excited to work with Dr. Daly on this, using very similar techniques and research design on our schools, and trying to study the communication patterns and network structure, knowledge network structure of teachers who are practicing culturally responsive pedagogy. So our last slide is just the studies I've referenced so far, and I just want to end by saying that we are a team that utilizes a wide scope of methods to examine and evaluate our projects. And so we maximize our current skills, both Chrissy and I now, on our projects, but we want to continue learning new methods by attending professional development workshops and conferences. We want to be updated in the field and be aware of new and improved techniques. And we want to be confident in examining the effectiveness of programs using appropriate and innovative methods, because of ultimately the policy implications that could come along with what we find.
Just a question on the communication, because we've implemented PLCs, professional learning communities. There are different acronyms that are used.
Yes.
And in some places, those have been implemented very effectively, and they're led by the teachers, and there's real buy-in that this is a great way. In some instances, it's not. And I think from where I sit, we've wasted a lot of money where it's not implemented correctly, and we've lost that goodwill to build those relationships where you really talk about the things that are important for students. And it's basically because it was a push to put test scores on a wall, and most educators don't want to do it. They want to talk about the students and how they help provide instruction. So I don't know if there's a way, Peter, in this to pull that, to bring some light on that and make sure that we make some adjustments so that everyone has access to an effective PLC. I think would be really powerful.
The reason this is so exciting for OEIB, I think to a large degree, is because of the work of Quality Ed and others that show that if it's teachers talking to teachers about something, it's going to work. If that happens naturally, whereas if it's more top-down and not so much integrated into the conversation, it will fail. And we see that when we do qualitative interviews and we hear it. This is a way to depict it, maybe in some ways that are going to be more actionable, and maybe allow for course corrections for schools or districts. This is exactly why we're buying this software, getting trained on it, is to try to apply it in places that we know the social network is so critical. You can't artificially create relationships by passing a bill or by having an edict. And I think we will see in the social network between School A and School B, or District A and District B, stark differences in terms of what this graph looks like. That's our hypothesis. right along with what you're saying.
That's actually, I think my question is very similar to Hannah's. In choosing the schools for this, are we intentionally choosing some where there's successful implementation and some that are not, or how are we?
Yeah, we did. We have like a list of criteria we looked at, whether they've shown signs of reading proficiency increase over the years for math, whether the student ethnicity composition is diverse, and also look at discipline and attendance, to just name some of the few criteria to look at.
But we're going to pick some high and some low performers so we can do some comparison?
I think at this point we are concentrating on those that are high performing so that we capture, how the cultural practice pedagogy could look like. But we can certainly look into the ones that are not, so that we can make comparisons.
Like no
Which help with
comparison.
Hannah's point.
I must say that chart looks like car sales in 2008.
Your car sales?
Or chapter 13, I'm not sure which.
And we should move to the next item.
Yeah, I think we should. Yeah, let's do that.
Thank
Okay.
you so much,
Yeah.
Cynthia. It's obviously a lot of rich stuff. Please follow up
Yep.
with questions,
Thank
audience
you.
members or board members. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Chrissy Hewitt. She comes to us originally from Oregon State, most recently from Oregon State University, and is not going to apologize to any Wisconsin
ju-
folks in the room about the coaching thing. Is just going to launch into a presentation
To
today.
keep on the theme that Eastern Washington did beat Oregon State.
Okay, so, good morning, Chair Withnell and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for having me. So yes, I did my background research, my dissertation at Oregon State in science education. I have a background as a biologist, and now I am working to look at investments. I've been working a lot with Mark Lewis, Director of STEM, because of my background as well. So today I thought I'd give you a sliver of the work that we are doing with Oregon's regional collaboratives. And really taking a systems level approach. So we are looking at the health of a system. So as you all know, our collaboratives.
It's not working, so just look at me when you want
Our
to go.
collaboratives include the regional achievement collaboratives, the STEM hubs, and the early learning hubs, and are really important investments for the state. They're also complex networks of leaders putting forward initiatives from multi-sector businesses and education. And because they're so novel and interesting and spread out and local, it makes it really hard to look at the systemic change, but we're really trying to take an approach of working with the communities to look at what's going on in the ground in the collaboratives. Our research team has been really trying to support the collaboratives, specifically around program evaluation, capacity building, consensus building, and not only the collaboratives themselves, but also at the state level, in strategic planning and logic modeling, data support. So we have these collaboratives that are tasked with a lot of needs assessments, a lot of data-driven decision making, but some of them have more or less capacity to do that. So we're really taking the approach that we work as brokers with the Oregon Department of Education to support them on data that they need. And we also work through research questions with them and things that they want to investigate. We also do some contract management, so when we see that they need more support, right now we're working with the Education Policy Improvement Center with the regional collaboratives to work on outcomes and consensus building across the communities. So as you know, the multi-sector collaboration, these collective impact strategies are really based on these 5 commonalities. The presence of the common agenda, really a shared measurement system, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication between the leaders and the networks, and backbone support. So really what we see here is these commonalities, but they're all very unique as well. So we have challenges when we want to look at outcomes and evaluation and looking at like a systems-wide picture of what's going on in the state and the collaboratives. So I want to share a little piece of work with the regional STEM hubs. So we're also working with the regional achievement collaboratives as well. We're really trying to look at some shared outcomes across the STEM hubs that will give us the ability to look at systems level change related to the strategic investments that have been put out. So what we're doing is we're working with the communities to think about what change do we seek and how are we going to get there and how are they going to get there, where do they cross over on outcomes, and how can we use those outcomes to also leverage learning related to hub efficiency and effectiveness across the state, so a peer-to-peer network. Having some shared outcomes across the state also enables us to help them with shared tools and resources. So if one collaborative has a resource or a survey on a specific topic like backbone of structure effectiveness, then that can be shared through the other collaboratives as well. Really what we're trying to do, both on a partnership level and a systems level, is really do this, continuous improvement cycle. We want to help the collaboratives and the system actually look at data as the investment is rolling out, and be able to act upon data. So have some formative assessment as we move through the cycles and not just pass judgment in an evaluative way at the end when we realize something could have been fixed along the way. So we want outcomes that will indicate, that things are moving smoothly or they're not, and we could step in somehow or work with the communities to help them as they progress. So we're selecting some outcomes that we can look at the systems level. So we have student level outcomes, educator, workforce, community, and really importantly also hub infrastructure. So these are partnership outcomes. So we know there's a lot of evidence-based practices regarding effective partnerships. And these, as the partnerships develop, these are some of the earliest indicators of that there will be a successful partnership. And then we also realize that these hubs are working in a system and they need certain systems level supports. They need policy supports. They need, barrier removal potentially related to local needs. So how is the OEIB, the STEM Investment Council, other folks in the state working to support that environment? So, so we have outcomes related to that. Really importantly, we've been working a lot with the hub's leaders themselves to collect the outcomes they've already defined for their groups, to see where the overlap is. So what we're doing is we're really working with them. We're really trying to make it come from the bottom up as well as put in requirements like legislative requirements, investment requirements that will enable us to get some.
Question, yes.
Yeah. So I just want to talk a little bit about how the outcomes are selected. Because my experience is more with the RACs than with the STEM hubs and the early learning hubs. But what I've seen, because I've gone to several of the meetings, is the people who are there are more of the administrators and
on the steering
the executive directors, the leaders. And what I'm struggling with is when you're looking at these outcomes for students, educators, and workforce, how are we in each one of these situations, STEM and early learning and the RACs, asking the students, what are the outcomes, and the parents and the educators, and really getting at, because you said from the bottom up, and the bottom to me in the work that we're doing is reaching to the students that we work with every day and helping know their hopes and dreams. And I'm wondering how we're getting at that, or if we're getting at that, because I haven't seen it yet.
I think that's a really important point about student voice, parent voice, and agency. I think you're right. We do oftentimes work with coordinators and steering committees and look at their outcomes. But I also think that we, especially in STEM, have looked at a lot of studies that have been done with students, with educators, and have been pulling from research practices as well as just, locally defined outcomes. So I don't know that we've been talking to individual Oregon students themselves currently. But I think that we know certain things like student engagement, student interest, access to, dual credit courses in STEM subjects is a good practice for getting at longer term student outcomes. So that's how we're bringing that in. But I totally see
How do we get to the, where dollars are spent? You have spent $1, then you have an outcome, which then equals a value of the dollar being spent. And we're not talking about widgets here, but Ron, how do we look at this as a manufacturing model? And so at the end of the production line, we have what we're after, and then so we're not worried about. We're not saying that we're spending $1 million here and we're focusing on that $1 million instead of focusing on what the outcome is. That takes the dollar to get us the outcome we want, to get us the value. We see instead of we're looking at this. You never would look at that in a manufacturing plant. I mean, down market you might spend more in advertising than you would in an up market. So So
I think that looking at outcomes and that process actually builds coherence in thinking about what the changes that we seek for the system. And it actually engages multiple perspectives in thinking about that. And it also identifies parts where we're missing something, right? So if we said, oh, well, you guys have a lot of student educator outcomes, but where's the workforce ones? And how, what indicators in a partnership, reflect the work that's been going on? And I get what you're saying is, you want to move forward in a line, but it's also, if you think about engineering, it's also that quality improvement cycle, right? So you're checking multiple places formatively to actually circle back and look and make sure what you're doing is being effective so that you don't get to the end of the dollar spent and realize that, your money hasn't gotten where you need it to. It's also an interim outcomes thing, right? So you want shorter term ones that, you can celebrate early successes or fix things that are going wrong. I don't know if that answers your question, but...
Well, go ahead.
I've gone back to what Ron shared, which was disturbing about how many employees he had to hire to have employees that he needed. And so when I look at the workforce, to ask our employers, what are those skills that you really need? And some of those, I think Ron articulated, were about, coming to work,
Right.
and so we're looking at
Have a work
absenteeism.
ethic,
Yeah.
Probably able to follow through on things.
Yeah. And part of that is really focusing on that well-rounded and really building a relationship with the student so that, it matters whether you're in my class today. And so I think we can build that, but we have to make sure that we honor that is one of the most important things that we do, that we help the student be prepared for life. And yes, we want them to be, have high test scores and all that, but in the larger scheme, there are other things. And if we can build that well-rounded, really ask our employers what are those skills, and then we have to honor that and put things in place. So,
and I do think that there's a big push for that, and that we completely recognize that college and career readiness skills, 21st century skills, interest, motivation, all these affective domain characteristics are really important for students, and we're trying to put that in the systems level outcomes as much as we can. Some things, will end up being in what the local outcomes are for the partnerships themselves, because certain things we can't actually look at system-wide because of the daunting nature of, assessing something that's difficult across many collaboratives. But we would like to do that, and I think that this is an opportunity with a shared outcome. If we all want to look at 21st century skills with students, then here's a survey that will bring to light what's going on in our programs, and we're sharing that same one across the different hubs, then we can actually look at, are we preparing our students better across the system, and enable those cross comparisons. So that's what we're hoping
I
to
think
do.
that the fear that, and if you go back, it was a different purpose, but when you had that chart and you kind of showed things are heading, I think, what our goal is successful students. And if we focus too much on just individual pieces of that without focusing on that they all have to fit together to make a successful student, keeping back there, that there's so many things that impact whether a student can be successful, whether a teacher can be successful. And so too much of a looking at that, and, we don't want to break it down too much. Ultimately, it has to add up to a successful student.
Agreed. And I think an interesting thing that's come out of this is working with the field. You don't want to place, you have to minimize the outcomes that you look at a systems level, but you don't want to portray that it's simplistic and that these are the only outcomes that are important for students, right? And we're really trying to be careful and considerate about how the field responds and takes up what we potentially put out there. And a lot of it, there's fears about accountability and should we have already done all this? And really we're trying to incorporate many levels and a systems-wide look. But I do see what you're saying about wanting a whole picture. But we do want to go across the spectrum as well. And if we switch to the next slide. We've really been working on trying to get some outcomes and really hone them down, but have ones across early learning to career, basically. This is a draft of some of the work we've been doing with the Education Policy Improvement Center and the STEM Hubs leaders. We just presented this with the STEM Investment Council Data and Metrics Subcommittee on Friday. And then we're hoping that these outcomes will end up meshing with the strategic plan also for the STEM Investment Council. So again, we may have to shorten this list. We may have to think about which outcomes span across. I'm really interested in input that you all have, may or may not have on this diagram and some of the outcomes. I do have a list of the actual outcomes. For time's sake, I didn't include it, but I could.
I don't know how you put this on the graph, but there has to be the sense of urgency of that these individuals. What always haunts me is this 80% of the brains develop in 36 months of birth. So there's got to be. We got to move along here so we don't lose our outcomes that we want. Anna?
And just on the STEM note, many of our elementary schools don't teach science, period. They buy books and they're on the shelf. And I think we've got to put an end to that, and people have to say, I say it in every meeting, my school will not teach science, it's wrong, we've got to fix it. And I don't think people believe it is not is.
Well, for example, on one of our educator outcomes is increased allocated science instruction for elementary schools. I can pass these around again. They're draft form. So we're continually creating lists like this, bringing them back to the field, working them down into things where we keep the really important things, but we need to minimize so that we can look at systems level change.
I'm curious, how do you cut through, and this is a lay person talking, right? My wife says lame. Where do you get through? Where do you cut through the bureaucracy and to focus on our end game? You one of the first things when you showed up, maybe you take a wrong turn or something, you gave us that, which was really, I carried it around with me. I got it in the car. Those two types of goals. What are they?
Predictive versus more strategic or aspirational.
Exactly. Aspiration goals versus goals. So how do we marry that to that? So we're moving. I guess we're moving along, but.
So I think it's the multiple levels and the shorter term and the longer term outcomes, right? If we have shorter term, 1 year things that we can look at, like how are the partnerships developing?
Low fruit, so to speak.
Yeah. But also, what's happening with the partnerships themselves? You see, like on the educator outcomes, have we been able to increase some interactions between educators and STEM professionals? That's an early indicator that, you know,
But I hear,
may lead to the longer
Hannah,
ones.
but Hannah says in our meetings here the last year and a half or so that we've been together, you say these things, and when are we going to say either she's right, or either she's wrong, or I'm right, or I'm wrong, or Ron is? When are we going to get to those outcomes that we can say, well, that's not the right outcome, so we're going to do something? I don't know. I'm just a little frustrated as
So Mark Lewis, who Chrissy works with closely on this, is very interested in coming back and doing a deeper dive
Okay.
with all of us around engagement and maybe some of these other longer term things. And I'll just share that we're in a very tough environment. People want immediate answers. They
Yeah.
want third grade reading, but they want someone who turns out of the whole system being a whole learner. And those two perspectives argue for different policies and different expenditures. And frankly, as a research team, we're at your service to help answer some of these questions. But there's nothing that Hannah said that I know of at a meeting that's wrong.
right.
It's weighing things like short-term versus long-term, focus on a standardized test versus focus on maybe kids being engaged, that we need to grapple with. Because if we ignore the short-term stuff, across the street, they're not going to listen.
And I'll
It's
say
a very
also
complicated.
these collaboratives, you know, are multi-sector, so we need to bring in other agencies, other voices. We've done a part of that. I have a poster over there. We presented I'm on the executive leadership for an interagency research group, and we're bringing in, you know, employment department folks and health folks and bringing together to actually look at the work and bring in their expertise. And I think that the multiple perspectives on these, especially for these collective impact collaboratives, is really important for this work.
So there'll be more, I think, on this exact topic, digging
Okay.
deeper. And Mark wants to come and talk about the workforce needs and how STEM and CTE line up with it or don't. Maybe compare and contrast with different goals. And I think it'd be really rich.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Yep,
Okay.
we're running short on time, so
Okay.
we can switch. We're just, there's lots of contributors to the work, right? So Regional STEM Hubs, our research and policy team, Mark Lewis, the Education Policy Improvement Center, and the Oregon Department of Education. And I completely appreciate any follow-up questions, any directions that you'd like to see this go. I really would love that feedback as we move forward.
Thank you, Chrissy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chrissy.
And finally, from our team, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mike Rebar. He's part of our database initiative work, but really because of his background, he's involved in all the different research things that we do here. And this is specifically about sharing data across our region. Thank you very much,
Do we dare ask
Dr.
him where he
Rebar.
went to school, or we just keep on?
3 times a dozen, but after that, I was a professor at Eastern Washington University.
Really? Wow, Janie, that's good. That's good.
So I'm framing this presentation in pursuit of 40-40-20. In order to understand our progress toward 40-40-20, we have to discover higher ed and workforce outcomes. And I say discover because there is no system, pre-built system for finding these outcomes. Historically, there's been one source nationally, the National Student Clearinghouse. However, that data source has significant quality problems, and it doesn't contain all the information of interest to us. So 5 years ago, the Gates Foundation funded a pilot study exchanging data across 4 states, across sectors. Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Hawaii participated. And we concluded that pilot about a year ago, and we found significantly greater number of outcomes for a significantly greater number of individuals. So the Gates Foundation has re-upped and is funding a 4-year study. They would like to see us expand to include a significantly greater number of states. So the project is often referred to as the WICHE project. Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education is the entity that received funding from the Gates Foundation. It's 15 Western states and the Northern Islands. So you might hear people say WICHE. That was part of Project Alder, Oregon's statewide longitudinal data system grant. But now the project is being rebranded, so what you'll hear is multi-state longitudinal data exchange. The WICHE folks want to take the focus off them and put it on the member states. We expect to exchange data with at least 10 states. It's possible that it'll be a significantly greater number of states, including some big players like California and Texas. Next slide. The WICHE folks look at this in terms of human capital development, so building capacity for tracking human capital development and its mobility across states, and they have a number of high-quality publications about our pilot study. So why 40-40-20? Consider a popular degree, or one that has historical and cultural ties to Oregon, forestry. What's our intent? Are we educating foresters, or are we supplying the nation with well-trained foresters? Where are they employed? What percentage are employed out of state? What do they earn compared to non-Oregon foresters? This type of project will help us answer questions like that.
And if I can point out on that, Mike, that this is something I saw in a presentation to the HEC about a year ago. We produce way too many forestry graduates in Oregon. That was how it was presented, because we have more graduates than there are jobs. But there was no follow-up question. Were they leaving the state, and are they populating Washington, California, and all these other places? And the answer was, don't know.
Right.
So how do we tell the universities how to adjust their degrees and provide incentives if we don't really know about the outcomes? If we're very parochial, just to Oregon, that's how we come, but people cross the state lines, so.
Absolutely.
Well, and that still goes back to the question that we go back and forth on. If the goal is to educate Oregon students so they can have successful careers, that may not be anything wrong with that at all. Having a successful career somewhere else, still in Oregon, a kid having a successful career
Yeah.
somewhere.
And not moving back in with their parents.
Right, so I don't think we have to say, let's tune it back so we're only educating enough foresters for Oregon.
Right.
Exactly. So this next slide is a sample graphic from the pilot study focusing on STEM degrees. And what's displayed is wage data, the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile with the median here in the center. For all STEM degree holders, those that were concurrently enrolled, those that were not concurrently enrolled, and earnings from the award state, one of the 4 pilot states, and earnings from another state.
So what is that telling us? What is $7,000?
That is the median quarterly wages for a STEM degree holder. I know
They earn $28,000 a year?
I know
That's
it
not
seems
pretty
odd.
good.
It's all on the same scale. So there's a lot of detail in the reports about how to truly understand this. But these are the values from the raw data.
Not a lot of money. I was at
No,
one of
I
this
guess
year.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
The draft doesn't tell me anything if it's not really their income.
Well,
Is that
a-
income above average or income on, if they're earning $28,000, we should close all the programs down.
Well, or move to Vernonia,
Yeah.
they're making 48.5, St.
Yeah.
Chokers.
Right. Ron, one thing we don't know, and most states don't know, is number of hours worked. So.
And this includes everyone in a job that's related to STEM regardless of hours worked. So you can compare it to each other, but it doesn't pull out the full-time from the part-time.
From
And
what I'm
that's where
hearing
we're at
from
right
you
now.
is I should skip this slide and we shouldn't have had it in here. Doesn't tell us anything.
It gives us the ability to look at workforce outcomes for STEM degree recipients that we've never had in this way before.
And I think, Ron, part of the STEM pool of jobs are not well-paying jobs. I mean, if we look
True.
at, and that I think people don't understand. If we look at the overall breakdown of what those jobs entail, it's surprising because when I looked at it, I was like, okay, so
Yes.
we're pushing for STEM, but are we getting people to a family wage job, which
Right.
is a...
And that's accurate. And the reports go into great detail about which codes are rolled up into STEM employment overall. So you can get very granular. There's similar displays for nursing pre-recipients, and you can slice that line and showing median wages when trained in Oregon and employed in Washington, vice versa. It's very new information that helps us ask better questions and refine our analyses around return on investment.
But what I do hear from the group is that in a similar presentation like this, we may want to get more granular so
Sure.
that people can get their hands around it.
You bet. So for this project, we have Oregon State Agency partners. K-12 data comes from the Oregon Department of Ed, higher ed data from the HEC. Oregon University System participated in the pilot, as did community colleges and workforce development. And this go round, we think we'll be adding in private and career schools and expanding our attention. And then the employment data, of course, came from the Oregon Employment Department. So what kind of K-12 data? There's a listing of this. The first pilot focused on high school completers only. We'd like to expand this time to include other outcomes, non-completers or those who seemingly can disappear from Oregon schools. And we're exchanging data on career and technical education to understand those investments, dual enrollment, higher ed readiness. That part is new. It was not part of the original pilot. And same thing for higher education data. We're exchanging enrollment, degree completion data, certificate completion, declared major, need for major coursework, and success in gateway courses that come from the literature. Key indicator courses where success is predictive of future outcomes.
So just on that, if I may, so the higher education data, and this is something that I've struggled with, especially with our community college. We talk about degree completion and certificate completion.
Yes.
And declare major. So I still really want to know, when someone walks through the door, is their intent to get a degree or a certificate, or is their intent to take a class? And I think we've got to be able to disaggregate that data and say, it's okay, Lane Community College, we want you to provide love of learning opportunities for our community, and we're not going to punish you for having students who don't complete a degree if they're not asking for that or looking for that.
And this project will get at those issues. The historical data source, National Student Clearinghouse, does not contain any data elements that would help us understand.
Great.
And then workforce data, UI wage records. And I want to point out that wage records in most states don't contain names. So the only way to link records is using social security number. But the records that are exchanged contain no personally identifiable information at all. It's a social security number and quarterly wages. So this project further abstracts that exchange to ensure that data are kept secure and privacy is honored.
That's our team.
That's it.
So one thing, just to follow up on what Hannah said, and again, just a plug for the longitudinal database, it's very easy to imagine a future where we could look and ask, for any given Oregonian who completes a community college course, or 2 or 3 or 7 with no degree, what life outcome changes are there? And they could do a survey, but we could even look at income at some point. And actually show this kind of quantitative value that right now is lost because we sort of have an artificial certificate or some other metric. It's getting student level data that allows us to give more nuanced answers. And right now we give answers that are more black and white and don't get to the reality of what a community college does, or for that matter, what a high school does.
And the paradigm shift is what Hannah brought out is, and this is in a lot of different other areas too, that we're paying for services. For the reentry program is exactly the same way we're paying for beds. When you want the recidivism to go down, you're penalized. And so you don't get as much money from the state. So anyway, that whole look needs to be, there's a real I really resonate with what you're saying on, because we're penalizing good production for.
Absolutely. And as this project progresses, I'll share more. But I mentioned earlier that the historical data source, the National Student Clearinghouse, using that data, we can't even answer simple questions like how many 2-year degrees were achieved, how many 4-year degrees were achieved. Those are very basic questions that we need to get far beyond.
And so Mike, in his role as data integration specialist, is also our key contact with moving forward on the state longitudinal data system, and really appreciate your coming here. And again, all of us are available for follow-up questions. We're 10 minutes till we need to break up, and a lot of public.
Right.
Public.
But I just want to say, Peter, thanks for bringing your team here. I mean, they speak English, which is nice. You know, especially for a C- guy. But seriously though, I really appreciate that and then go back and keep coming. Nancy, just welcome you here. Pam had to go to testify, and I also at 11:20 have to meet one of the representatives on the ELC, so that's we're going to be on that. So,
We ending early.
yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
But Peter, when we talk about this collaboration with other states, are there other states that are significantly further down this road than we are?
With their longitudinal data systems? Mike, you want to answer that?
There are states that have an identifier that crosses sectors. So the state of Alaska has common point, and that's their mechanism for tracking. Florida and Texas are
When we did the business case for our SLDS, that was one of the things we did is look state nationally. And there's some models out there that we're hoping to copy with the work that we do, then they're ahead of us. And it's actionable data for their education system.
Yes.
I know, Peter, you are all over this, but the great concern with data and data breaches and recent activities
Yep.
have caused people to be fearful, and with good reason. We just have to be so careful that we do not allow any information that would be harmful to Oregonians to get out there, and that the data is used in the right way, and that people understand what data we're collecting and how it's going to be used and all that. So I know you know all that. I just
Yeah,
say it out loud.
and we're a partner with Representative Frederick and others to get better legislation. We wholeheartedly agree. Matter of fact, nothing would set our efforts back further than not having good laws on the books and having a big breach or something. That's in our interest as much as anyone's. So I'd like to just acknowledge for the record that public testimony was received by email from Pat Mueller, and that's been included into the record, and all the committee members have that.
Okay. Okay, we'll do with public testimony. I apologize, I'm going to be leaving here in about 8 minutes or so. It's bad manners, but I have to go over the other side. Bruce, is it Hanson?
Yeah.
Yes, great.
Pam's friend.
I only have 3 minutes, so I have to talk fast.
Yeah, okay. Well, Linfield guy should be able to do that.
I teach continuing ed. I have to put on my coat so I make a good impression. I teach continuing ed at Portland State and at University of Oregon, and I'm on the faculty at Lewis and Clark College. And I don't represent any of those places right now. I'm just talking on my own. What I'm hoping will come out after my testimony is that you'll invite me back or launch some research on this topic I bring up. I want to talk to Peter a little bit about this. First of all, think about low-income schools, and you are already aware that 50% of teachers self-fire themselves or whatever turnover within the first 5 years of teaching. That problem is much worse at the low-income schools. Also, as a result, the staffs there tend to be very young at these low-income schools. Right now, if you look at university catalog at the 3 places I work, there are no classes directed specifically at the needs of low-income schools. You talk to those deans, I have talked to some of them, they'll say, hey, we're addressing this in all of our general classes, but there's nothing specific there. Now, I am working on a project to get a specialization through TSPC for teachers who teach low-income students. And that's going to happen. Here's what I need you guys to do. I need you guys to figure out a way to support and to support districts who want to hire these teachers that have this specialization. There's one state in the union that has this specialization, that's South Carolina, and it's going fabulous and it's going terrible, fabulous. Those classes those universities offer for this thing are packed, and those professors are going all over the country speaking. Book deals are coming out. This is thriving. But only a handful of teachers bother to get that credential because there's no support from the state for these districts. So anyway, if you could think about how OEIB could support this new TSP specialization that's going to be coming out, I appreciate it. Also, Hannah was the most fabulous PE teacher I've ever met. She had a secret. No one in her class was allowed to fail. I watched her follow these little kids around the playground and say, hey, you need to come in and retest. You need to pass your test. And so she was just amazing. And you know her voice is amazing. It can carry through a whole gym. Anyway, I saw her a while back and urged her to return to the classroom, but she found something really valuable to do.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we got the Kingston duo here now. Jim? Good to see that your handwriting hasn't deteriorated any.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that I see the kids come into kindergarten and you're testing them for school preparedness. And in King, I see the scores that are generally true, that minorities are not ready for school yet when they come in. The white kids are testing 2, 3, 4, 5 times the score than the minority kids are. And in King, we've gotten 5 new assistant teachers, but they aren't being applied to focus on the kids who are far behind. I mean, they're used to help the teachers in a general way, and they're certainly valuable that way. But the kids on the bottom are still not being brought up. I mean, in the manufacturing model, if you have incoming quality problem, you get it fixed right away, so that the product can go through and be processed properly. And I don't feel that if you aren't focusing on the kids coming into school and getting them ready for school, you never solve the problem.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Dr. Doppel?
I am looking for an answer to my question. I look at the African American kids in these schools. I look at them individually, physically. Because when I go in the community, go to Starbucks, I'm looking at the cashier. I want to see an African American there as a cashier. The flagger, I want to see an African American. I'm not talking about lawyer now, that's a very tough one. But just a simple job. Then when I see the way they perform in schools, they can't get those jobs. Then I'm looking for an effective corrective action in a physical sense. Either from you or from the district somehow. What somebody or some group, what they are doing to help these kids become somebody. Become contributory member of the society. To do something with themselves. They hang around in the community. The parents are dragging down. They end up going to prison. And I'm looking at all these papers coming to us, coming to me. And it's about human being. It's about human personality. It's about you guys, because something happened to us. I got something to do what I do. In fact, I got something that allowed me to be able to see somebody, physically see you, what you do, what you become, where you're going. So, I'm looking for an effective corrective action somewhere, in a physical sense, where it's being done to have an effect on these kids. Are you hearing me, Dick?
Yep, amen.
Yeah. Something to get them charged up, get excited. I'm going to work that home. I see you later. Hey, Dick, I'm going over there. Yes, because that's the purpose of human being. That is our purpose. That is the purpose of human being. You and me, everybody.
Okay, thank you. That's our charge. Yes, Hannah?
NEA just did a training, and there's Pipeline to Prison. There's a whole lot of work going on, and OEA, we've done some research and trying to do some training. I think it's absolutely something that is important for us to address, and there's a whole lot of research out there to help us put some things in place that we can look at as we talk about equity. I think I'd be happy to work with NEA. The training that was just done in Texas, from the members that went to that, said it was amazing. So I'd be happy to follow up with you guys about that.
Okay, any other comments?
Well, it really, as we hear these compelling testimonies, it really makes me think of some of the strategic investments that we're suggesting, which is starting early, kids coming to school ready to learn, and reading by 3rd grade. I think when I hear Jim say, we've got to make things, if we don't start early and we don't really lift all kids up so that they can be successful in kindergarten, we're paying for remediation down the way, which is really costly on the self-esteem of a child and then very costly otherwise. So I feel really good that one of the key things we're all focused on is that 3rd grade benchmark and coming to kindergarten ready to learn. And that means what we're doing on the early end, early learning, is really critical.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.